Hi, welcome to your October Reset, a new webinar from Broadleaf Books about intentional living in the year ahead. I'm Ellie Rocher. I'm your host. I'm the author of The Embodied Path and the co-author of 12 Tiny Things, as well as several other books. I live in Minneapolis with my family where I teach writing and yoga. And today we're going to be joined by several really inspiring writers to discuss October theory, a trend you may have seen online that right now in October, not the new year, is the perfect time to turn inward and guide your spirit with joy and purpose. I'm in Minneapolis, and in the end of December and early January, it is dark and it is cold, and that is the time to hunker and maybe energetically not to set goals. So October is much more appropriate time to start gazing inward and shifting our habits as the winter sets in. So let's get started by meeting our panelists. First, Brittany Wynn Lee. Brittany Wynn Lee is an author, nonprofit professional, and seminarian who writes to make room. Living in Louisiana with her creative husband and big-hearted son, Lee works bivocationally as the Grants Outreach Coordinator for the United Methodist Foundation, while also publishing numerous books, including The Boy with Big, Big Feelings, Rally, Communal Prayers for Lovers of Jesus and Justice, and Good Night, Body, Finding Calm from Head to Toe. With a BA in Religious Studies and a master's degree in nonprofit administration, Lee has worked for over a decade in faith and justice-based creative community building. Welcome, Brittany. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ellie. I'm so excited to be here.
Joining us next is Christine Walters-Patener, the online abbess at Abbey of the Arts, a virtual global monastery offering retreats, prayer services, books, and resources to nurture contemplative practice and creative expression. A writer, poet, spiritual director, and teacher, she earned her PhD in Christian spirituality from the Graduate Theological Union at Berkeley and is a registered expressive arts consultant and educator. Christine is the author of more than 20 books on spirituality. She and her husband, John, live on the west coast of Ireland, where together they shepherd Abbey of the Arts and lead online programs. Her latest book is Give Me a Word. Welcome, Christine. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ellie. Delighted to be here.
So glad you're here. And last but certainly not least, we have Karen Walrond. She's the author of The Light Maker's Manifesto, Radiant Rebellion, and her latest book, In Defense of Dabbling. As a lawyer, leadership coach, and activist, she has helped thousands of people around the world find purpose and meaning in their lives. Karen and her work has been featured on Brene Brown's Unlocking Us podcast, PBS, Huffington Post, CNN.com, and the Oprah Winfrey Show. A sought-after speaker, Karen's award-winning blog, Looks is a lifestyle, inspiration, and photography destination. She and her family reside in Houston, Texas. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So glad you're all here. I can't wait. I'm so excited. So we're in this moment. It's October. There's so much happening in the world. Folks are overwhelmed. They're isolated. They're confused. They're exhausted, right? And now is a moment, an opportunity to turn inward and to maybe do some habits that feel smaller, more manageable as a way of staying in our bodies, staying in our purpose. So that we're going to talk a little bit about that in a way that hopefully offers a little bit of hope today. So we're turning toward what some say is the holiday season, right? It can be the busiest, but it can also be the loneliest, right? Folks talk about those two things, and simultaneously, those two things are different. So let's talk a little bit about that. In this season that's busy and can be lonely, how do we live a little bit more intentionally as the outer chaos and distraction is going to invite us out of our bodies?
So I would say that as a traditionally compulsive yes sayer, the first thing that comes to mind for me with this question is a little piece of advice that I have taped up on my laptop that says every yes to something is a no to something else. And so essentially, it's saying to choose your no's intentionally. They're going to come regardless. So choose them intentionally, right? And more than that, I'd say to celebrate them, and celebrate them when other people offer them to you. One of the greatest ways that a friend has loved me in recent years or shown me love is when they asked me or invited me to be a part of an event that I had to painstakingly say no to. And their response to me was, "Thank you for loving me enough to trust me with your no." And it has stuck with me. It immediately released me of shame and freed me to be intentional. And it's just so beautiful. I think that type of lens, that type of value, that type of priority, what it does amid the chaos and distraction is it gives me that margin needed for intentionality, rather than whatever default survival self is left from the crumbs of overburdened selves. And so, I think all the time there are plenty of scenarios in life where we can't control what we have to say yes to. But approaching the ones that we do have agency over with some purpose and peace might make all the difference for those times that include the former. So I try to remember that every yes is a no, and every no is a yes.
That's right.
I think that sounds to me, Brittany, like what you're really talking about is self-compassion, right? Like it's really being focused on taking care of yourself in the moment and treating yourself as you would your best friend. And, I think, especially as the holiday season comes up for a lot of us, especially for those of us who tend to be the caretakers in our family, right? The mothers, but parents or everything else, we can feel like if taking any time to ourselves, taking that intentional no, can feel selfish. But I'm of the opinion that selfish is getting a bad rap, right? And we can call it self-compassion as well. But the truth is that especially if you're the person who generally takes care of things during the season, during the end of the year, chances are that no matter what, you're not going to stop taking care of that, right? Like you're sort of internally wired to take care of family, kids, partners, parents, whatever. So making that intentional no is not going to all of a sudden make you a completely selfish person, right? Like you are allowed to say no, and you are allowed to take care of yourself, because you're not going to suddenly abandon your parenting duties or your daughter duties or your partner duties. And I think that's really, really important to have that intentional no. I think it's a great point.
That's so
Yeah. You both said that so beautifully, and I'm a third person in favor of the sacred no. And yes, creating that physical and emotional space to be with what we're experiencing, the difficulties, the heaviness, the challenges, even just to have a little bit of that breathing room to be with ourselves in the midst of everything, that all the demands that are coming at us, that can create that a little bit of that softening, that cushioning. And I'm a big fan of Tricia Hersey's work on rest as resistance. And I think it can be a really helpful thing to ponder is, can I let my claiming of rest through that sacred no be my small way of resistance in this moment to a culture that demands that I'm productive and busy and, judges my self-worth based on what I achieve. So just another little vote in favor of napping as resistance, resting, saying no as much as possible. Yeah.
We need well-rested, well-nourished people in community right now.
Amen.
And the systems are counting on us being exhausted. So anything we can do to tend to that is is the good trouble, is the resistance. I love that. A few things came up for me. You know, selfish means of self,
Right.
So can we redefine the baggage around that word and move from a sense of self, right? I do believe that no is a holy word, and it's my growing edge. In 12 Tiny Things, our first chapter is on space, in terms of like creating space in your calendar, as well as in your closet, as well as in your mind, right? Like that, creating that space, then we can live into that space with intentionality. And, you know, our mantra from that chapter, Brittany, similarly, is saying no to one thing is saying yes to the possibility of something else. I think that's where that intentionality can happen, where instead of life happening to us, we're co-curating this life out of this sense of nourishment in the space that we've created to really move slowly at the speed of trust. One fun thing around this is I have two women in my life who write each other permission slips. They work together. And so they'll write each other permission slips like elementary school to say no to functions that are going to drain them, that they don't need. Sometimes it's the other women in our life who help us be brave enough to say no, to find that holy no. So thank you so much for getting us started. This is already so rich. Karen, I'm gonna ask you to start this next one, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'd love to talk about enjoyment and activity in terms of mindfulness. So your new book discusses hobbies, right? And how hobbies are rooted in desire. Ooh, I love that. And also in interest, that spark inside of us can be a compass, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of excellence or achievement, maybe it's this lusciousness, this desire that can help us cultivate hobbies that might be the most fulfilling. Can you say a little bit more about that? I love that.
Yeah, I love this. And I think it really dovetails well into the sacred no, right? So I became really interested in the idea of hobbies because it felt like when people would catch me doing a hobby like hula hooping or something like that, like people were like, oh, I could never do that, or I don't have space for a hobby, or I don't have time for a hobby. And so I really thought I was going to be writing a light book on hobbies, right? And I thought it was just going to be like, oh, it's just a little fun book. And I was also interested in the idea of being an amateur, because amateur, I think, is used as a pejorative, right? Like we think of something like you're such an amateur, or that's an amateur move. But the truth is that the word amateur actually comes from Latin, meaning one who loves. And I don't know about you, but I think the world needs more lovers in the world, right? And so I really wanted to understand, like, what does it mean to have a hobby, to be an amateur, and to do things for love as opposed to profitability or perfectionism, right? And so what I did, because I too can be a perfectionist, I came up with what I call the 7 habits of intentional amateurship. And these were things that I figured if I practiced various hobbies, and in the book, I practiced like 7 or 8 of them, but I stay tethered to these 7 attributes like curiosity, mindfulness, play, self-compassion, connection, wonder and awe, right? Stretching your comfort zone, all of these little things, that perfectionism would start to fall away because I was focusing on that part that was about curiosity or mindfulness. And what ended up happening is by the end of the book, I realized that having a hobby, like having a thing that you return to on a cadence, that you return to for enjoyment, for love, for rest and recreation, recreation, right? Right? When you return to it like that, what you are doing is you are creating a practice of self-compassion and even self-transcendence in your life. And I think that when we talk about, I mean, you guys are more of the experts on this than I am, but when we talk about things like spiritual health or emotional health, like often the recommendation might be something like meditation or yoga, which is great. Love it. But not everybody is a natural meditator or a natural yoga person. But when you find that thing that you love to do, that mountain biking or that whittling or that whatever it is, and you're focused on doing that on a cadence, you can get a lot of that self-care and that self-compassion that you might from a yoga practice or a meditation practice. So I really do feel like, to use a word that we've been using already, that really the practice of intentional amateurism, of a hobby you love, is a very sacred thing that you can do for yourself.
Mhm.
You know?
Oh gosh, I love this so much. And okay, couple things. I have some, get me at it. I love asking people like, what's something you love to do that you don't get paid for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In our capitalist society, we just love turning passion into money making, and then that can suck the joy out of it. And so, and I see this like with taking spiritual practice off of its pedestal. There are people who think some of these things don't count.
Yeah, for sure. And I to that question that you ask, I tell people all the time that like your job isn't what makes you interesting, your hobbies do.
Yeah.
Right? Because that really taps into something that you just do because of love. It's not just to pay the bills, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and I have to mention Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic here, right? It's just like that inner, and so interesting after our first question, that inner yes, you know, like that thing that you do that you don't get paid to do, that it just makes you come alive.
Yep.
How about more of that?
Amen. Yeah.
And that makes us contagious of like, what does that person got going on? Well, it's joy, it's restfulness, it's self-compassion. And it is contagious. And I think that it matters in community. Ooh. I love how you're reframing amateur simply by using recognition. Beginner's mind.
Yeah.
And like,
That's
what
right.
you mentioned hula hooping, like, what are we doing where we can't take ourselves too seriously?
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Amazing.
I think pleasure is such an underrated like tool for our own liberation and joy and being able to sustain ourselves. I actually have a practice because one of my grandmothers, that side of the family comes from the very Puritan kind of background, and I never saw her smile really when she was alive, and I just felt this like the weight of that, you know, expectation around busyness and productivity. So I have this practice where I try and do things that are pleasurable, enjoyment, not necessarily things that I'm skilled at, but just things that give me pleasure, and send that joy back to her and back to my ancestors. And it's such I don't know, it's like a really tender thing. It's also a really joyful thing, but it's like this honoring of the fact that women, I think in particular, didn't really have the freedom to pursue things outside of like raising their family and doing, you know, all the things that they needed to do. And I think it's just a way of, I just feel a lot of gratitude to live in a world where I'm able to, participate in those kinds of small pleasures in life and take delight in them. Yeah.
So beautiful. And I think small pleasure is so key, because we're looking for these huge swaths of time. And I will say, I talk to so many women in particular who will only allot pleasure once everyone else's needs have been taken care of.
Right.
Right. And so that ends up being at the end of the day, maybe 9 p.m. when you're exhausted, and then you don't have access to that exuberance anymore. It's like, what do you have energy for? Maybe Netflix, right? Which is not true pleasure. And so you're quarantining it till the end of the day. How do we pepper pleasure in throughout the day when we have some energy, when we have some attention to give it? How do we schedule joy? How do we schedule pleasure where our needs and wants matter too, and it becomes part of our way of living instead of this thing we have to earn and then never get to? Right?
You know, I talk about this so much, and I think we forget that that we are beings of nature, right? And that nature works in cycles, right? So there's a reason that there's seasons, and the moon waxes and wanes, and tides rise and fall, and even the way we breathe, right? We inhale and exhale.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, Ellie, that we have this sort of belief that we've got to go. And I think as part of nature, we are hardwired. We are actually programmed to work in cycles. We are supposed to go and rest and recreate on a cycle. And that's how we are at our optimal best. So this idea that we should, we'll wait till 9 and watch Netflix and be done. I think that we are not only just doing ourselves a disservice, I think we're acting counter to the way that we are actually wired to live, and that we are to do everything better, we have to have a cadence of rest and recreation. Like that's the way to Trisha Hersey talks about this all the time, right? Like this idea that it is actually rest and recreation are our birthright. And we should be able to do that in order to do everything better.
And I love, Karen, how you said you thought you were going to write a light book about this. I mean, like even starting this conversation, maybe people are thinking light. It gets revolutionary so fast because of the context that we're navigating.
Absolutely,
right? Where coming back home to ourselves is revolutionary work right now in terms of claiming our creatureliness and the cadence, right? Learning from the trees, learning from the seasons. Okay, Christine, can I turn to you for this next one to get us started? So every year through your work at the Abbey of the Arts, which I can't wait to come visit, you invite people to listen for a word to guide them in the year ahead. I love this. Would you talk a little bit more about this ancient practice of give me a word and the power it has for this moment? I'm in already, 100%.
Yeah, no, so this practice is rooted in the early desert mothers and fathers. And these were these amazing men and women who lived in like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries in Egypt, Syria, and Palestine, who were fleeing the cities, fleeing really like the forces of empire and, you know, all of the ways in which Christianity was being co-opted by the wealthy and the powerful. And they go off into the desert to find these places of stillness where they could have this radical intimacy with the divine, where they can really listen. And we have collections of their stories or their sayings. And so a lot of this phrase comes up in a lot of the sayings, give me a word. So these seekers come out, you know, they go off to find their solitude, but then they find themselves surrounded by people who are so hungry for their wisdom. And, you know, the seekers come and they say, give me a word, you know, Amma or Abba, which was the name for the mother or father. Give me a word. And the word is meant to be, it's not, so this isn't like a New Year's resolution. This isn't like goal setting. We're not, when we ask for a word, we're not asking for something to like adjust our life according to our own kind of our own sense of how we want to direct our own lives. Because what the desert elders really want us to do is to open to receive a word that's so much bigger than what we can imagine for ourselves, that can open up our lives in a direction that we might not even have anticipated. And so this idea is like softening into receiving a word that will be nourishing for me, that will be liberating for me in a given season of my life. And that word might nourish me for several months, several years. There's even a story in the desert elders of a monk coming back after 20 years of being with the word that the Amma or Abba had given to them. So there's this beautiful wisdom. And for me, in the desert tradition, it's really this focus on how do we enter into the space of vulnerability and risk of asking for a word that will transform us, that will really break us open. How do we listen for that in a way that gets out of our own way, where we're not trying to manufacture something, we're not trying to achieve something. And so that's how the practice came about for our community. And I have a love of things like natural rhythms, like Karen was saying. I have a love of animals and a love of dreams and intuition. And so the practices in the book are really about different intuitive ways of dropping our defenses, dropping our need to achieve, and make something happen, and to open up our hearts to listen for what is the word that would actually be transforming, renewing, expanding of our heart and our vision, so that we move into the world, with something that could be liberating for all of us, as opposed to a resolution that's going to just only take us so far in our lives, and then probably feel like a failure because we don't achieve them. So it's really about listening for something, so much bigger than ourselves, and waiting to receive that as a gift, as opposed to thinking that there needs to be a particular kind of word that I need to find.
Oh, Christine. Okay. Oh, so I'm hearing, to go small in order to go big.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, I hear overwhelm, paralyzed by overwhelm, but we can do a word. And if it's a gift, the word is actually a gift, it immediately breaks things big again.
Yeah.
Right. So to go small in order to go big. I love that. I think about Mary Oliver, attention is the beginning of devotion. And so what a beautiful way to shift our gaze in the year to come. If it is really the nourishing, life-giving word, to place where we place our attention, that thing grows, right? And that can act as just this really gentle guide in the year ahead to come. I am also not a fan of New Year's resolutions. I think we often go too big. We think there's something outside of ourselves that we're lacking, we need to go get to be enough. These are all lies, and then it falls short, and then we feel shame, right? Yeah. So I think that's what we're up to in the October reset, is can we just shift all of this back to coming home and doing this intentional habit building that sustains, that nourishes, that grows. I don't know, Brittany, this sounds like a intergenerational practice. What do you think? Picking the one word?
Yeah, I think that this is something that's accessible to all ages, and that, I mean, that's the word, right? That's the accessibility, that none of this has to be this big. None of us have that big chunk of time. None of us have this big surge of energy. We're waiting to, and I was thinking about this with talking about dabbling and hobbies too. I had a voice speak into my life recently that said, a vibrant life isn't something we arrive at. It's something we build incrementally. And so this idea of arrival, of having it just drop in our lap, that's maybe unrealistic. Maybe it's never going to come. It's definitely an anomaly when it does. And so what are these little moments? I loved, Karen, what you were talking about. I'm writing down these words like cadence and practice and ritual, and this idea of like a liturgy of enjoyment, a liturgy of desire. And I'm, Christine, my word for this year has been savor. Recently, I went through which is in line with what we're talking about. I think I went through 6 years of hustle, 6 years of secondary infertility, and just work. What can my body produce? What can my life produce? And now I'm starting to ask questions like, what can it experience? What can it savor? And I'm starting to dabble in hobbies like running and baking. I've got this killer chocolate chip cookie recipe these days because I'm just trying to savor and incrementally build that vibrant life that that you're just not gonna immediately automatically get to.
Yeah. And the root of the word savor is saporum, which is connected to sapientia, which means wisdom. So there is wisdom in the savoring and the slowing down. I know this particularly because savor was my word several years ago, and it's one of the stories I tell about. It was because when I started exploring what the word meant, that's when it's like, how one little thing can just have keep growing and growing. I think it goes back even to like hobbies. Like we can have something that seems small at first, that when we give it that loving attention, just like grows and grows and grows in us and brings us, what we desire. Yeah.
Yeah. As I listen to both of you speak, one of the things that came up for me when I was writing the book, and I think you're both touching on this, is so that I mentioned the 7 attributes of intentional amateurism. And when I wrote the book, I did a hobby. I tried a hobby for each one of them, right? So there was something, I did pottery for curiosity and a swimming practice for mindfulness. And, I had all of these little things that I did. And then the one that stuck for me is pottery, right? And what's interesting about this thing that has now captured my attention and that I keep wanting to return to, because practicing it returns me to myself, right? Even though I was doing pottery purely for curiosity, explore curiosity, the truth is that I also get to practice mindfulness with pottery, because if I'm not in the moment, the clay can go flying. Or I practice self-compassion because there's so many different ways that the pottery can fall apart, right? In the different stages. But one of the things that was surprising for me, and this is the part I think both of you have touched on, is that pottery allows me to access also wonder and awe. Because as I do this and I get better at it and I become more proficient at it, I think about the fact that I'm in a practice that has been practiced for literally millennia, that archaeologists use shards of pottery to prove that civilizations existed, and that my pottery may live for thousands of years after I'm gone. And I think what we're talking about, Christine, what you were talking about, moments of pleasure that you give back, right, to your grandmother, or the fact that you're savoring, right, then you're enjoying this thing and you're baking and doing things that not only is fun for you, but I'm sure that the people around you get to savor the baking that you do. So you're able to nurture and take care of the people you love. And I think that idea of tapping into things like wonder and law and connection and things like that, that's what we talk about with self-transcendence. And yes, we don't have the time, right? We do. But if we don't have the time because we're so busy with these other things and our responsibilities in our lives, the beauty of going back to these things, these moments of pleasure, is that it's not supposed to be a chore. It's not supposed to be something that you do because it's good for you to do it. It's something you do because you can't help yourself, that you want to go back to this. And sometimes that means 5 minutes, and sometimes that means a whole afternoon. And it just sort of depends on where you have that. But that practice of going back is how you tap into the things, especially in this season, you tap into things like connection and wonder and all the things that we really want for as we come to the end of a year, right? We want those things, but we want it in a natural way that sort of arises from us.
That's right.
When I'm hearing too, that we need to retell the story of like when we're savoring, other people are benefiting. There's a story, especially for women, that if I'm savoring, I'm the old definition of selfish.
Yeah.
That's isolated. It's like, can we believe that nourished, savoring women are like, that's going to ripple and affect the whole community? That what if that's the work of our lives? Brittany, I want to circle back to, this is so rich, to the shift that you named between what can I produce versus what can I experience? Because I think that's what we're talking about too, of like, what can I produce, to me is about serving the structures, something outside of it, versus what can I experience? It's being brave enough to take that risk of saying, I am this body, I'm this cosmic being, I get to have this life, I'm going to claim it, and understand that is a way of being in the world that matters. Right? And so I feel like it's in that good selfish savor. And also, like, I'm hearing you all talk about like this desire to drop out of time, like to drop into ritual time, where that schedule, that productivity, that efficiency can drop away. And whether it's for a moment or for an afternoon, we can just unfold and be. Oh, so good. So good. Okay, Brittany, I'm going to pop back to you because I'm really interested in your book here too that's coming out. Talk about the magic of creativity. and you love talking about both adults and children. So how does wonders come up a little bit, wonder and awe. How does wonder create that sense of renewal that we're longing for this October reset as we look forward?
Yeah, so my book, Sacred Curiosity, I started very intentionally with a chapter called Curiosity is Accessible. And I mentioned that earlier, that this, and I think that's the foundation of it, right? That's what drives it for kids and adults alike, is that this is there's this incredible resource for reawakening that is hidden in plain sight, that is just one consideration away, one thought, one musing on one thing that you decided to linger a little bit longer on. And I think sometimes that happiness and contentment and purpose and passion, these can feel like super tall orders, right? Especially when we're burnt out or lonely or depressed or anxious, or we feel like it's too hard to exist in a world that feels like it's burning. But wonder is an invitation to follow breadcrumbs to a fuller, more vibrant life. And I share a story in the book about this moment when it was evening and my son was overstimulated from long travel that ended in a funeral for a great grandparent. And it seemed like, there was this mind trap that we were not going to get out of that evening. There was just a ball of anxiety that was building between the three of us. And so I came into the room and I said, everybody grab a blanket. We're going to the trampoline and we are going to wonder hunt for a little bit. We're going to forego the routine of bedtime and we're going to wonder hunt. And we read each other Percy Jackson chapters and we watched Orion's belt surface and we followed the hide and seek of fireflies around the peripheral of our yard. And we talked about, we pointed out the stars and we talked about how small we felt in a good way, and how feeling that small makes you feel connected to something bigger and longer and vaster and richer and more beautiful and less fragile than we realize is possible when we're inside hiding from monsters, And so I think curiosity pulls us into that creativity and into that wonder. It pulled us into that night, both kids and adults alike. And so it shifted something for us, right? It shifted our brains and our bodies, our spirits. And it didn't take us solving all the problems or healing all the wounds to do so, right? Like, we still had a very overstimulating experience. We still had a death in the family, but it gave us enough of a breadcrumb to follow until we could get to the next, which I think is ultimately the magic of it all. And in the book, I link it back to, give us today's daily bread. Like, we just need just enough for today to get to tomorrow.
Ooh.
Beautiful.
Ooh. I love that story. How profound. How profound. And the wonder hunt is, again, allowing the practice to be active instead of passive, that we can what we're seeking is also seeking us, but that intentionality in that phrase, that we're not going to just like move through our day a little numb and assume wonder is going to come get us. Sometimes we've got to hunt it down, right? Decide that's where we're going to place our gaze, and we're going to go looking for it, and we're going to find it. It's going to find us. That's really, really beautiful. And also similar to the one where the small to get big, right? It's like the getting big to feel small, to feel big. Like there's that transcendence that happens when we realize how big creation is and how small we are, and we don't have to do it all before lunch.
That's right.
Oh, thank you for that. That's so beautiful. Well, I think there's so many great examples that have come up, and I think sometimes people need to hear what other people do for intentional living, and that might not be for them, but just hearing our own intentional practices might spark for other people what theirs is. Would you each be willing to say a little bit about some, like one or two of your like tangible habits, your practices that work for you in the moment?
I mean, I can start.
Thanks,
One of
Karen.
the ones that works for me is I'm a big to-do list person.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I do every day when I make my to-do list, I write down everything I need to do. And then I ask myself 3 questions. How can I be healthy today? How can I be connected today? And how can I be purposeful today?
Mm.
And the answers go on my to-do list. But understanding that sometimes my to-do list is huge. So for example, how can I be healthy today? Like sometimes I have the room to go work out for an hour or, but sometimes life is lifing and it's too hard. And so it might be, I'm just going to drink extra water today, or I'm going to go to bed early today. I'm going to take a nap today, right? To that sacred nap that Christine was talking about. Same thing with connected. Sometimes it's, I'm going out with friends. Sometimes it's just, I'm sending an email to somebody and saying, hey, I thought about you. I just wanted to say hi. But the answer to those 3 questions, healthy, connected, purposeful, like the self-compassion for me is not in ticking all of those off, but it's actually the daily practice of asking myself those questions, right? And it's the practice of checking in with myself. So that's something that I do. And I sort of like lean in hard in it when things get really busy, like at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Love
Yeah,
that.
it's busiest when it's the most important. It's the
Yeah.
easiest to slip, and then it's the most important to do if it works for you. I love that. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was beautiful. I wanted to mention too, one is just I just have like a little 5-minute morning snuggle time with my dog. And it's totally my like moment to remember in the morning that I am an animal body and she's an animal body. And there's like beauty in the fur and the skin connection. And I'm like totally in wonder and awe that this little creature lives with me and adores me and I adore her. And so it just gets to start my day off with wonder. And so it's like savoring the joy of that connection. And then the other thing I do, which is also kind of a practice of savoring, is I have a list in the front of my journal, 2 lists, 2 circles actually, one of which I have like my really dear closest soul friends, like my spouse and my other dear friends. And then I also have like my healing practitioners. I have a lot of chronic illness issues. And I spend time praying just in gratitude for them, for all of the friends that I have, and then for all the people who, like my massage therapist, my doctor, my physiotherapist, like all the people who are involved in helping keep me healthy and vibrant. And so there's also for me the wonder of being with my dog, but then also just the gratitude for and feeling connected to that community of people in that moment, and just offering them that prayer of gratitude for who they are and how they help uplift me, and praying that they get to get what they need to keep them sustained as well.
Oof. Those are beautiful. Thank you. Brittany, how about you?
Yeah, I feel, a good indicator, like a good warning sign for me that I need to tune back in is when everything around me looks corroded or corroding. When I walk out into my backyard, and what is highlighted is the things that are dying, or the things that are not kept up, or the things that are, when my lens is that, then I know, I've got some maintenance to do on my soul. And one of the ways that I do that, much like the wonder hunting, is I take wonder walks around my neighborhood. And you mentioned, Ellie, Mary Oliver's poetry earlier. And my favorite line out of my favorite poem of hers, the summer day, is where she says, "Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean." That line, "This grasshopper, I mean." And the idea of just sitting and taking in this mechanical creature, right, and letting that reset you and reweave you into the bigness of things, in the smallness of this thing. And I don't think it's a coincidence, that's the poem that ends in her infamous question of, tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. And so I try to go on wonder walks, and I try to ask what it is that something wants to teach me, remind me, reconnect me. And then out of that comes that gratitude that the corrosive lens can't see, right? And then that's how I know, okay, I'm tuning back in. Not everything's dead and dying. Or it is, but it comes back to life.
Well, and what I'm hearing in your remind me, teach me, there's that risk that I heard in Christine's give me a word of bless me. I'm asking for a gift.
Yeah.
Right? I just love that. I love that. I think that's so important. And it gets back to Karen's hobbies in terms of that beginner's mind. Let me be amateur in the very best way of that world, walking out to do your wonder walk as an amateur creature, right? Of what do we have to learn today? That's a posture shift. So riffing on Mary Oliver, I don't know how to pray, but I do know how to pay attention. I'll add one of the things that works for me. One of my tiny practices is at some point every day going outside and looking all the way up. Not just looking up from your phone, not just looking away from your computer, but looking all the way up. Every time I do it, it works. Reminds me kind of like on the trampoline, how big the world is, how small I am. It's always beautiful, no matter what the weather is. It rightly situates me in the world, right? My shoulders relax. I exhale. It just it shifts my posturing, right? Literally and figuratively, in a way that if I do that every day intentionally as a spiritual practice, over time things shift. Right? So what's that tiny habit, that tiny practice, that committing to the hobby, right? A little bit over this season of busy and lonely, that will get nourishment, that will get joy, that will get pleasure, right? To ripple out back toward our ancestors, Christine, right? And into the community that we live. So good. Folks, is there anything you're being moved to say as a final word of encouragement? This has been so amazing. Any sending?
I think for me, it's just that our spiritual practice matters. Our time spent in presence and attention. I mean, it's what we've been talking about the whole time, but our time spent in that loving attentiveness to the smallest moment, thing, practice, whatever that is, that's what becomes enormous in the world. That's what we magnify, through our loving care and attention. And it matters in the face of all of the horrible things that we're facing in the world. That we're to do those things is exactly what's needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I concur. And also, I think that taking that time to pay attention, taking that time to experience joy, taking that time to experience gratitude, that's actually how we gather the energy to re-engage in the world. And that's how we actually remember what we're fighting for in the world, right? We want all people to be able to experience that joy and that pleasure. And without doing that, that's where burnout comes from. So the practice is necessary, not just for us, but also to help make the world better. I truly, truly believe that paying attention and that cultivation of joy and recreation. Yeah.
Karen, that makes me think of the phrase, "Don't just do something, stand there."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of don't just stand there, do something. Don't just do something, stand there so that you can do something.
Yeah. Exactly right.
Oof.
Which is what a way to start a year, right?
Mm.
Where if we're moving into, if we're in liminal space, if we're moving through the transition into through this October reset,
Mhm.
stand, pay attention,
I love
take the
that.
next steps.
Oof.
Yeah.
Take the next right step, right? Like just the next breadcrumb, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could talk to the three of you all day. I feel like we're just getting started. What a gift, the collective wisdom that kind of whipped around here. Oh, I am richer for it. So thank you so much for your time and for your attention. And thank you for the beautiful, beautiful books that you all wrote. I'm so excited to savor them and pass them around. And I hope that you can stay in your bodies and stay nourished during launch season. It's an exciting time where the book kind of takes on of its own, right? So thank you so much for your time and for your energy, for your wisdom, for your compassion. It was so inspiring. I'm feeling really, really full. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, so this conversation sadly is coming to a close. But we'll have similar conversations. And we hope that this is just the beginning, right? That you'll start having more and more of these conversations with folks in the community, and that these three beautiful books will nourish you and ripple out to you and your family and your community. And I hope that this holiday season feels a little slower, a little bit more easeful, a little bit more connected, and that you can come on the other side in 2026 feeling rested and centered and full of life, right? So mentally healthy, physically healthy. I wish that for you. If you've registered for today's webinar, you'll also receive a link to each of our panelists' beautiful, beautiful books to support you on your journey. So be well and enjoy the rest of your day.